Hi, folks. This is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report. You know, as I'm talking to you right now, I realize that the conditions this year are different than any of the years I can recently remember. First of all, we've had clinging to this warm weather that has kept our streams so low. All our tributaries are at midsummer water level, and it really does change things a bit. I'm not sure when fish like smallmouth bass in these tributaries decide to go into their fall migration, whatever they do, wherever they go in the fall. And I've said for years, it's a puzzle to me. I can't give you the answer, but I never can go out to my favorite places in the fall. Excuse me. And find fish like I can in the summer. So right now, a lot of these smallmouth are still in the same places. And one of the things that I've gone on about, and I've told you how I catch these fish in the tributaries using small baits. Well, you know, panfish soft plastic lures are going to work for just about everything. Bass are going to hit these just as readily as panfish do, even though they're little. But with a little bait comes a little hook. And I've really come to realize that maybe I've been at fault. I tell you that when I'm fishing these in the rivers, because of all the boulders and potential snags, I use as light a weight as I possibly can. I use a 1/32 ounce ball head jig to hook most of the baits. And there's a huge disadvantage to that. There really is, and I wanted to pass that on to you. One of the things that I always stress is how we should try to keep these fish alive. If this is catch and release, we want to make sure we release them in the best condition we can. And by using these little tiny hooks, and believe me, you'll catch a lot more fish with little bitty hooks than you can imagine. Those hooks will embed themselves in the fish, but the problem is because they're so little and because the baits are small that you're using, when these bass strike, they'll try to suck it in and swallow it in one motion. And they can be pretty successful when there's just a little tiny hook in there. So the problem comes when you reel them in and you try to take them off, try to release them. Getting your hand inside their mouth is really difficult. And if there's a little tiny hook in there, you've got no leverage. You've got nothing to grab onto but trying to find the eye of that little tiny hook. And you can really damage the fish in trying to remove this little hook. I think it's a far greater threat than I've ever said before. So with that said, I would try to use at least a size 6 jig head hook. Now that's still a small size, but it's much bigger than the tiny little hooks that come on a 1/32 ounce jig head. Another thing that I think you should be aware of that's really important is the jig head that you choose to put your bait on is going to make a huge difference from another jig head. In today's world, these companies that are making these jig heads, they were always made out of lead, and now they're made out of, they call them tin. But whatever the material is, it's much different. But the shape of how they shape them is critical because it determines how that bait will look in the water, the way it's going to lie on the bottom or the way it's going to sort of glide down to the bottom as the current carries it along. This is critical. And, you know, all these baits like Z-Man's tiny little baits and Berkeley's Max Scent little baits that I've been swearing by, the way you hook them is really, really critical. And the Ned head jig heads that they design and that they sell for a pretty good price. When I say pretty good, I mean a pretty high price. These don't come cheaply, but they can determine how attractive that bait looks in the water and how easily you can release that also. This is a critical factor, you know, and I've learned the hard way lately by having some fish, I believe, die after I put them back in the water. And this, for lack of a better choice of words, this really breaks my heart. I don't want to kill anything unknowingly or for no reason. I want to make sure I do everything to try to keep these fish alive. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report.